The safe use of fiscal policy from Funding Master.
Welcome to Funding Master. So how can we use fiscal policy safely to assist our economies during the management and recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic? As someone who did my economics degree during the 1980s, we were far more conversant with Keynesian policy, expansionary fiscal policy, as well as centrally controlled left-wing economics. So what did we learn that might be useful in this circumstance? As I talk, the EU Council is locked in a fourth day of talks, trying to agree the scope of a €750 billion rescue package and the next 7-year funding programme. At the heart of this debate is the safe use of fiscal policy, when most economies are already running large deficits. These are legitimate questions. However, there are a few key points to understand when considering the safe use of fiscal policy. This time is different. The economic shutdown was mandated by public health policy. Nobody's misbehaviour created the issue. It is a public health emergency, and talk of moral hazard really has no place here. The correct policy has been followed, with the supremacy of public health policy. The only way to ensure that the economy did not freeze up and drive society into a depression was government spending, funded by borrowing in the main. There was no other reasonable policy response. The cost of not spending would have been a complete seizure of society, not just the economy. Not all fiscal spending is the same. The diagram gives a quick explanation of how a simplified government budget should work. Spending breaks down into 3 broad areas: recurring spending, one-off spending, and capital investment. Recurring spending covers spending like salaries, social welfare payments, pensions, overheads for public services, and bond servicing. These are required to be paid irrelevant of economic conditions. One-off spending has a start, middle and end, and do not have to be paid long term. Investment for capital projects is funded under infrastructure. These are all funded by taxes and revenues, which are recurring taxes, one-off or windfall taxes, and borrowing. Ideally, recurring taxes such as income tax, VAT, social insurance, etc. would fund recurring expenditure such as salaries and pensions. One-off taxes such as capital gains tax and windfall corporation taxes would fund one-off expenditures, and ideally borrowing would fund the capital investment programme. Emergency one-off spending is not expansionary fiscal policy per se. It increases the national debt but does not increase the size of the recurring public sector. Furlough payments, emergency subsidies to individuals, families and businesses that fall off when the economy gets moving properly and people get back to work are one-off expenditures. Funding for innovation projects and pilot projects are one-off expenditures, all appropriate emergency expenditures. Using the current emergency fiscal spending funded by borrowing to expand the core public sector is a bad idea. Now let me be clear. If there is a coherent case for increasing core public expenditure, then by all means make that case. However, increased recurring spending has to be funded through increased recurring taxes. Let me put it another way. When the current emergency borrowing and spending ends, how do you fund the increased recurring commitments you're making? And the answer is only through increased recurring taxes. This is at the heart of the current EU debate. The frugals are concerned that some EU countries will use the emergency grants to increase their ongoing fiscal commitments and result in weaker financial positions and increased deficits. So if you want to increase ongoing public expenditure, then please explain upfront which recurring taxes you will increase to pay for this and separate it from the emergency funding discussions. This expenditure will mainly be funded through longer-term government bonds. Most governments will fund this borrowing through at least 10-year bonds. Each year, the interest on the bond is paid to those who hold them, and at the end of the term of the bond the premium is repaid. But of course that's not what actually happens. In reality, the annual interest is paid, but instead of paying off the premium in 10 years' time, a new bond is issued to pay for the premium, and the bond rolls over and remains on the national statement. Only when you have a large surplus at the time and choose to pay off the premium do they actually disappear from the national debt. So this will be funded over a very long term, and the ECB stands as a hard backstop to fund government bonds in a future emergency. Effectively, we only make the interest payments which are currently at very low levels. This is why this borrowing makes fiscal sense in this emergency. So, in summary, the safe way to use fiscal policy is to focus on one-off expenditures to stimulate the economy in the emergency, and be careful not to increase recurring expenditure using the current emergency funding. This is of course an opinion piece, so you feel free to agree or disagree. Please feel free to share the video.
Funding Master works with clients to develop, write and submit funding applications. You can find out more about us at our website www.fundingmaster.eu. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. Please contact us if you have any questions relating to our work or this video. Thank you for taking the time to view this video.